Hey everyone. Today, we're going to dive into some really fascinating and, I think, rare truths about tribal peoples. We're going to challenge some of the most common and, frankly, mistaken ideas we have about them.
So let me just ask you something right off the bat. When you hear the word tribe, what's the first image that pops into your head? Is it something primitive? People kind of stuck in the past? Just hold on to whatever that image is, because we're about to put it under a serious microscope. This quote, right here, it really gets to the absolute heart of what we're talking about today. You see, the word tribal is just so loaded. It's a label that often ends up telling you a lot more about the history and the politics of the person doing the labeling than it does about the actual people being described.
Okay, so first up, let's just break this label down. What does tribe even mean, really? And where did it come from?
So here's the first thing you've got to understand. Tribe is not some neutral scientific term. Not at all. It's a political label, and it was historically used by empires and states to categorize people who didn't fit neatly into their top-down, centralized systems. It's a way of subtly saying they're less organized than us, or less advanced. And this is so important, because behind that one little word, tribe, there's an incredible amount of complexity hiding. The group being labeled could be a full-fledged nation that just doesn't have statehood, or a complex confederation of clans, or even the remnants of a kingdom that got pushed to the edges by an empire. These were not simple societies.
Okay, so if they weren't just stuck in the past, then what was going on? Well, the answer is pretty fascinating. For many of them, it was a conscious political choice to live as an alternative to the state.
And this is where the entire story gets flipped on its head. You've got the common view on the left, right? Seeing these groups as failed states or as lacking something. But the deeper insight, over on the right, shows them as intentional alternatives. It wasn't about lacking civilization, it was often about actively rejecting a certain kind of civilization.
So why would you do that? Well, the reasons were incredibly practical. Think about it. By choosing to live outside of direct state control, in the hills, in the forests, you could avoid all the stuff that came with it. Crippling taxes, slavery, being drafted into armies, and just general imperial domination. It was a strategy for freedom.
This leads us to something truly mind-blowing. Their systems of knowledge. We have this bias that if it's not written down in a book, it's not real knowledge. But what if science and history could be stored without a single book?
You know this myth that real advanced knowledge has to be written down in a textbook? It's a powerful one, but it's just fundamentally not true. Many of these communities have what you could call high-resolution ecological intelligence, and this isn't just, quaint folklore. We're talking about centuries of fine-tuned observation and data, things like being able to tell soil types apart just by their smell, having calendars with dozens of micro-seasons instead of our 4, or deeply understanding the medicinal synergy between different plants.
And this table just illustrates the difference perfectly. Modern science often wants to break things down. It asks, what is this plant chemically? But tribal knowledge asks about the whole system. It asks relational questions like, when does this plant become safe to eat? Or which insect has to show up before this plant is ready? It's a science that's focused on the living relationships within an ecosystem.
So how do you preserve all this information without writing it down? Through something called memory scaffolding. And it's not just about remembering stuff. Knowledge is literally woven into songs, into rituals, into the names of rivers and mountains. It makes memory something that's durable, something the whole community shares, because it's written onto the landscape itself.
Now this brings us to an absolutely core concept, and it's a source of so much deep historical conflict, and that's the very idea of land itself.
So, in the modern world, most of us see land as property, right? It's an object, a commodity, something you can own, you can buy it, you can sell it, you can put a fence around it. But for many tribal worldviews, this is a completely alien idea. Land isn't an it's a relationship. It can be an ancestor, a living being, a sacred trust that you could never sell. And this is why so many land conflicts aren't just about money. They're, as the source material puts it, a collision between two different civilizations of reality. So this is a really crucial point. When we see poverty or what looks like backwardness in these communities today, it's so often not some kind of inherent cultural trait. It's actually the end result of a very specific historical process. First, their foundational wealth, the land, is taken. Then, their traditional way of life is made illegal. Their culture is broken down. And finally, they're forced into dependency. Backwardness isn't found, it's produced.
Okay, so when you put all of these pieces together, it really forces you to take a step back and ask a much bigger question about how we even measure things like progress or civilization. What does being advanced actually mean?
Think about it like this. Our modern industrial civilization is optimized for scale, speed, and control. But many tribal systems, they were optimized for completely different goals. Continuity, for generations, adaptation to a specific place, and a sense of balance and belonging. They're not failed systems, they're highly successful systems, just with very different priorities. And get this, our modern society might take one function and split it into 6 different departments. You've got environmental protection, religion, law, medicine, agriculture, heritage, right? But as you see here, a tribal system might hold all of those things together in one single living practice, like the management of a sacred grove. That's not confusion, that is incredible integration. So ultimately, all of this leads us away from that really simple and kind of judgmental question about whether these societies are advanced or not. It's just the wrong question to be asking.
The deeper, and I think much more interesting question is this: advanced for what? Advanced for short-term extraction or for long-term survival? Advanced for control or for belonging? Advanced for building empires or for sustaining an ecosystem for 1,000 years? Now that is a question that changes everything.